Yeah, so I think we are finally going live on YouTube as well as the webinar has started.
Okay, yeah.
Hi, Subhajit.
Yeah, hello.
Hi. Oh, 100 people have already joined the webinar.
112, it's...
Yeah. So I think we'll wait for another minute and then I can introduce and then you can take over. Is that fine?
I think Asima will be...
I'm going to introduce, we had a talk with Ashima recently, so I'll just introduce for the
Okay, you will be doing that. Okay. And Nandita has joined.
Join this one.
I'm just checking on YouTube, Sayantan, and then we can begin.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. So I can see it on YouTube.
Yeah, it's going live.
I'll pass on the link. Yeah, I'm going to pass on the link and then I'm closing to YouTube from my computer. So pass down the link. Yeah, just a minute, Nandita. Give me a. I'll do that. Just give me a second.
Nandita, you should now have permission to record.
Right. So I think this is a good time to start the webinar. Should we go ahead with it?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Sayantan, and thank you for joining. I would just take 2 minutes to quickly introduce the event before we jump right into it. And first and foremost, I must thank all of you who are here, both on the webinar itself and the YouTube live stream that's simultaneously ongoing, for joining us even amidst this massive crisis that we are all going through in some or the other way, courtesy the pandemic. So thank you for joining us. That it means a lot. It tells us that at least we're doing something that everybody is willing to engage with, which means quite a bit to us. At the same time, I would like to, for some of you who might not be familiar with thelifeofscience.com and the work we do, we are a small independent feminist multimedia science collective, and our work deals a lot with not only trying to understand the science that is done by people from our backgrounds, so to identify and report and work towards better methods of understanding what keeps people from marginalized communities to do science from India, and how is it that we can make it better. And with that, I would also like to introduce Subhajit. Subhajit is the moderator for today's session. Subhajit is an assistant professor in Jadavpur University, and thank you, heartfelt thanks, Subhajit, for moderating this. Just one more thing, which is that please use the Q&A box for putting in any questions that you might have. For those of you who are watching us on YouTube, please put it in the chat, and we have somebody, Nandita is helping us do this. Nandita is part of the TLoS team who's going to pick up your questions and comments and send it to us here. With that, there's also Ashima. Ashima is also a co-founder of TLoS, and she would also be helping us with the backend. So if you have any problems at the backend level, please feel free to reach out to me or Ashima. One thing that we might want to keep in mind is that while we are discussing and while we are putting out questions and comments, we want to do it in a safe way as possible. So we wouldn't want any kind of caste violence at all on the comments. So it would be great if we keep that in mind while we engage with the webinar today. And also, let's try to make the most of it. Thank you. Over to you, Shivajit. Thank you so much. Oh, one more thing, I'm sorry. For our friends in media, if anybody who's from media is here in the audience and is listening to us, it would be great if you could report your observations in your own own media houses, in your own ways, because we really want maximal engagement about this issue as possible. Thank you. Over to you, Subhajit.
Yeah. Well, let me at the very beginning thank uh, uh, the Life of Science team, and of course, the entire webinar is happening in the context of the Seema Singh episode, which is the infamous Seema Singh, the casteist professor of IIT Kharagpur, who basically, abused the SC/ST PD students, which is not really new. But then when there was this Twitter storm which was going on, the DV activists and all the allies, those who are basically, uh, you know, uh, 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 storming the Twitter, we were basically trending with end casteism in IITs, right? And that's when me and Sayantan, we both were thinking that we should be doing something. There should be a webinar or something like that. There should be a greater kind of discussion on this, and that needs to be recorded, right? Uh, for a greater number of audience. So having said this, let me sort of very briefly, tell you my own experiences and my own, uh, words on the whole issue that is casteism, caste, and caste-based discriminations, atrocities, violence in the campuses of higher education. That actually happens everywhere, right from the primary to the higher education. But then today we are basically trying to talk about, what is going on in India's top, educational institutes, from the IITs, from the state universities, if there are any, from the central universities, and the science and tech institutes, the think tanks, basically. So the of course the myth of caste and caste-based, the Savarna understanding of merit as it goes, of course, is very, very reductionist, and we all know that how it goes. It basically sort of this is basically done to gatekeep, the institutes of higher education. That is across. That's in the media. That's in others. Public spheres, in other institutions, right from bureaucracy and other judiciary and other places. But in the academic spaces, the Savarna gatekeeping is done in a very, very violent way, and that is through various means, from the epistemological patronage, from the from reducing the identities of the students from the marginalized communities uh, to making atrocious comments, and in fact normalizing on looking down on the marginalized caste students. So this is quite being normalized in India, and this also has become global. And this is happening, of course, at a time when we all know that the Cisco case is in front of us. In the Cisco case, you would know that the two IIT fellows, those happen to be Savarna fellows, those are working in the Silicon Valley in Cisco, and they basically discriminated on the basis of caste, a lower caste engineer there. So as Dr. Ambedkar said that, today there would be a time when Indians, the caste Hindus, would be traveling across the world. It will become a global problem, and it has really become a global problem. Caste is everywhere. But having said this, let me also very briefly tell you that in 1 or 2 minutes that my own experience in two central universities, basically in Hyderabad Central University and JNU, has been not really very good. It's been largely humiliating and traumatizing, and so was the case with many of my friends from the marginalized community groups. Today, when I teach in a university which is, in a way, quote unquote, very progressive university, progressive in a sense that they are otherwise radical without interrogating the caste privilege, the caste Hindu supremacism of the upper caste professors, in fact upper caste students. So it's a kind of uh, uh, double-edged sword for the marginalized caste students. But then we are living through a pandemic time, but this is a kind of double pandemic for the students from the marginalized communities, the SCs, STs, OBCs, and other even sexually minority students. So so for them, they are not only really fighting the social vulnerabilities that has exposed them with this COVID-19 pandemic, but then the whole COVID-19 pandemic also brought us into the virtual platform, like online teaching and things like that, and these also has become another kind of pandemic for the marginalized caste students and many of the marginalized. And there have been cases where the online teaching is not really being affordable for the marginalized caste students, and which is what is happening. There has been cases where a lot of my students from the from the tribal areas, they failed to join my classes, the real-time classes on Google platforms, and they say that's our I'm not being able to connect with you because there's poor internet. They do not have even devices, quote unquote modern devices, to really get connected. So this is the kind of so this whole pandemic amplified the whole vulnerabilities that is otherwise faced by the marginalized caste students. And now we have in front of us this casteist professor of IIT Kharagpur, Seema Singh, who happens to be an associate professor, and she was taking an online class, which was with SC, ST, and PD students, physically disabled students, and they, and she was heard in a video that she is calling them with the words like bloody bastards and things like that, which is very traumatizing. But then at the same time, which is very interesting here, is that she is taking pride and she is sort of asserting her impunity, and that is quote unquote Savarna impunity, that nobody can really do me anything, right from the minority, the Ministry of Minority or Women Commission or SC/ST Commission. So this is how the entire, not only Savarna gatekeeping is happening in the top institutes of India, but at the same time there is also Savarna impunity that exists. So they proudly assert that impunity in the face of the marginalized students, and this is for the first time she got caught with a video, and this is being recorded. But then there are some underlying ways of doing perpetuating caste-based discriminations. And in the case of Bengal, I call it a Bhadralok politeness, where they very politely they will discriminate you, and and that is everywhere, from JNU, from HCU to Jadavpur. Some of it you will never understand. It's like in the during the interviews, when a marginalized caste student scores handsomely, but then score is given 0 or 1 out of 20 kind of thing during the interview. So that kind of underlying discrimination goes on. And some of the campuses otherwise assert that they are very radical, but they will never talk about Ambedkarite, Periyarite tradition or Phuleite tradition. But then they will go on celebrating the Savarna man who is otherwise, who plagiarized his own student's thesis, Mr. Radhakrishnan. So this is largely the story of India's top institutes, where you have ample number of experiences, from Rohit to Anita to even in the case of medical institutes, there's Pile Tadvi case, and then you have the AIMS cases that keep on coming. There are many cases in IITs and of course in the central universities, JNU, HCU, everywhere. And then the subtle isolation, humiliation, and segregation that actually keeps on happening, and there is no end to it. So that is in a way invisible, but then that is experienced in a almost on a daily basis by the students from the marginalized communities. And basically the Savarna gatekeeping of educational institutes, or maybe the knowledge production, or maybe the pedagogical domain is done to not only isolate or to otherize the students from the marginalized communities, but they are also being told in a way, in an invisible way, that this is not your place and you are quote unquote not meritorious. So there, this whole Savarna understanding of merit has also, as I say, that has reduced the India's higher education domain to nothing, because as I keep on writing this, that if the Savarna merit, the way it is being eulogized by the Savarnas, if it is so much in a way qualitative, then why you do not have an Edinburgh or an Oxford or a top institute here in India? So it is basically the failure of the Savarna merit. So right from the vice chancellor to the registrar to the deans to the head of the departments, everywhere you have the Savarna person who is basically running the system, running that particular domain. So this is broadly the case everywhere. In almost, you name any institute, you will see a Savarna person sitting over it. So with these words, I'll keep on coming back, and we'll keep on interacting with all the panel. We have basically a power-packed panel. All of them are quite, some of them will be sharing their lived experiences, and some are basically fighting this whole, the segregation of the marginalized communities, the way it is being done by the Savarna professors, even Savarna students at times. So we have, let me very quickly then introduce this very impressive panel. I don't see Professor Dilip Mandal in the on the screen, but then let me sort of introduce others. We have Dilip will be joining a bit late, maybe. Professor Dilip Mandal is, of course, a very senior journalist and, of course, a prolific writer. He's been, flagging the issues of the Dalit, Adivasi, and marginalized students, and, of course, their issues. But we have also with us Dr. Rehnamol Raveendran. Rehna is now with the Delhi University, but she holds a PhD degree from JNU, and she's been associating with various Ambedkarite movements in JNU. I personally know her. And then we have, of course, Prajwal Gaikwad. Prajwal is doing masters in history from Hyderabad, University of Hyderabad, where I had also studied my master's in political science. And as I got to know that he is also the General Secretary in charge of ASA. We dearly call Ambedkar Students Association as ASA. And he was also the founder member of Ambedkar Students Organization, ASO, at Fergusson College, Pune. We also have Russell. Russell is an independent researcher whose work lies in the intersection of a very important aspect of intergenerational trauma, aesthetics, gender, and in fact neurodivergence in Dalit communities. We have Shalini. Shalini is actually doing PhD in life sciences at University of Hyderabad, and and looking at network of neuros in grasshoppers which are possibly involved in communication. We have Vaishali. Vaishali is a PhD scholar in anthropology at IIT Hyderabad, again another important place. We have, of course, Tejendra Pratap Gautam. Tejendra is a PhD scholar at CPS at IIT Bombay, and very important to note that he is also the member of APPSC IIT Bombay. And of course, and then Grace Banu is a Dalit, and Grace needs no introduction probably, and a transgender activist. We have, of course, with us Riya. Riya is a doctoral researcher at Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University in Delhi, but then and she is basically expertising on caste atrocities, and the Civil Caste and Civil Rights Prevention of Atrocities Act. She is also a part of the core leadership committee of the Dalit Women Fight, which is basically India's struggle and largest Dalit women collective, and they are doing impressive work. And she also works on the ground with the survivors of caste atrocities of Dalit community, and as much as 5 states of North India. And we also have Makepeace Sitlhou. Sitlhou is a Guwahati-based journalist, and she's covering India's northeast region. Is again a very important place. The quote-unquote Savarna gatekeeping, Savarna dominated media basically ignore it and in a way glorify it, but then do not talk about the trauma there. She is also she has written for publications like CNN, International Foreign Policy, Nikkei Asia, Vogue Business, Vice World News, and even Al Jazeera. Also produced documentaries for Vice Asia. So with those words, let me sort of we have. Okay, so with those words, let me sort of first invite Tejendra. Tejendra is with the APPSC IIT Mumbai. To Tejendra, basically, Tejendra, you get 8 minutes to speak, and I request Tejendra to sort of go ahead with his speech. Tejendra. Tejendra, can you unmute yourself and go ahead? Tejendra?
We might have lost Tejendra for a while. Subhajit, do you want to move on to Dr. Raveendran?
Yeah,
and
then
we'll come back to Tejendra.
Okay, then. So we'll come back to Tejendra. Maybe we might have lost the link. He will rejoin. So I then request Dr. Rehnamol Raveendran. Rehna is, of course, she is teaching at Delhi University. She holds a doctorate degree from JNU, School of International Studies, and she has a long experience in the Ambedkarite movement. So please go ahead, Rehna.
Thank you, Subhajit, for that introduction. Jai Bhim, very good evening to all. First of all, I would like to thank Sayantan and his team for this great initiative. For initiating and implementing this great idea of inviting the like-minded people to discuss or deliberate upon the issues that are pertaining to the young minds of our own community people in Indian universities. attendees and my co-panelists for being here. As you all know that, the problem, being in this community, we all have faced this kind of problem. So I was thinking that instead of just problematizing the things or discussing the problems itself, so I was thinking that I will move on to the solution part. Because I'm not talking to a Savarna, a kind of an audience, to convince them that these all are the issues that been existing. So I would basically looking at the solution part. We all know that, there are overt or covert, reported or unreported discrimination in university campuses. We all know that Rohit Vimla case, that's been a wake-up call for lot of us, for it's been a shaking incident for every one of us. A lot of left student leaders have made their career out of Rohit Vemula incident. But ironically, what happens is that the same left leaders, especially from JNU, because I've been there in JNU and I know that how this left student leaders have made a career out of it. But at the same time, when there is a suicide of Muthu Krishna happens at the Center for Historical Studies, where most of the faculties are left leanings, and they've been silent over Muthukrishna's suicide. And we all know that how he been harassed in the center, which is known for the elitism, the Savarna domination. We all know that how there has been harassment happens. And when Muthukrishnan incident happened, all those left leaders, student leaders, who've been survived on Rohit Vemula incident, completely silent on Muthukrishna's incident, and Muthukrishna's incident being a responsibility of the Dalit organization within the campus. So what I'm trying to say here is that we need to understand that all those the student leaders who've been drawn from the Savarna community have always been anti-Dalits or anti-Bahujans. And there is no doubt about the fact that whenever there is an atrocities on Dalit students happen, it becomes a political vendetta for the left student organization or for the right student wing organization. It's not that there is a kind of a sense of commitment or sympathy or empathy from this mainstream Savarna student leaders towards Dalit Bahujans. So what we need to understand is that there is a need to have a Bahujan organization, student organization or Bahujan network within the campuses, not only to empower them, but also to produce a kind of a sense of solidarity among the Dalit Bahujans whenever there is a kind of an issue happens. Because I've been there in JNU and I know how the advent of BAPSA kind of an organization, which is of course an Ambedkarite organization, being standing together whenever there is an issue arises, related to Bahujan community. So, in order to empower them, in order to create a kind of a sense of solidarity among our students, we need to create a student organization across the country. That's very, very important. And if you look at the IITs especially, in comparison to the Social Science Institute, we know that there is completely an absence of student activism or student mobilization in universities like IITs, because it's largely remain as a apolitical, and there is hardly any kind of a student mobilization in IIT. So hence there is a kind of a more rate of suicide or dropouts, because the students in IITs especially, they don't feel any kind of relief or a place where they can reach out to whenever they face the problem. And the only thing is left then is that to just commit a suicide or just to drop out. So it's very, very important to create Dalit Bahujan organizations or network across the Indian campuses, so that we can create a sense of solidarity among our own community students, so that they can stand up together to solve out their problems collectively. So it becomes a kind of a collective responsibility, instead of just taking it as an individual challenge, where every individual has to take up it as a challenge at an individual level. So we have to make it as a collective responsibility for which we need to of course create a lot of Dalit student organization across the country. We need to embolden that network among the Indian campuses. And second thing I would like to point out here is that the major cause of the discrimination that I see in Indian universities is, of course, the over-representation of the Savarnas. If you look at the faculties, if you look at the powerful positions from registrar to VC, we all know that it's been occupied by almost all the Savarnas. So this over-representation of Savarnas in academic institutions, from faculties to registrar to vice chancellor, it creates a kind of a hostile environment for the Dalit Bahujans. There is a kind of unfavorable ecosystem existing within the campuses because of this kind of an over-representation of Savarnas. And here comes, when there is a kind of an issue happens, then it's a vicious circle where even if you try to raise your issue, that becomes a kind of insignificant among this network. So none of them are interested because none of them feel a kind of a sense of connectivity or sense of sympathy towards the Dalit Bahujans. And this over-representation of Savarnas create a kind of a vicious circle which need to be dismantled. Here comes the importance of reservation, because a lot of the perception is there that reservation is just about job creation, but reservation has a lot of significance beyond that job creation or beyond representation. The representation creates the opportunities for a lot of marginalized people, Dalit Bahujans, to come into the universities and to make the academic environment more democratic, which is very, very important. That to make the institutions democratic, or the institutional structure democratic, or the academic environment democratic, we need to have a diverse representation, or we need to have an inclusive representation where most of the Dalit Bahujans come and then occupy those administrative positions or powerful positions, so that we need to facilitate that environment favorable to Dalit Bahujans. We need to make that environment livable for the Dalit Bahujan students. So it's very, very important to create an inclusiveness or inclusive representation of the Dalit Bahujans, which is something that we've been missing. And also, we all know that 200 roster system, or the implementation of economically weaker sections, how it has emboldened the influx of the Savarnas again into the academic system. We know that how this roster system or the economically weaker section reservation have actually stopped a lot of Dalit Bahujans coming into the university spaces. So this is very, very important. We need to, apart from creating that student organization across the Indian campuses, we also need to understand that the reservation is very, very significant in order to make the life of the Dalit student or Bahujan students in the campuses livable. We need to make their life livable. So reservation is very, very important thing that we need to stress on. That is my second point. And if you look at the legal and the the administrative mechanisms in place in universities to halt the discrimination against the Dalit Bahujan students, we know that a lot of mechanisms are in place. If you are looking at UGC regulations, I think Makepeace also have written one article in the Wire regarding that UGC regulations, where the UGC has implemented a regulation, the promotion of equity in higher educational institutions in 2013, and that contains the provisions for the establishment of a equal opportunity cell, and also an administrative officer to halt the discrimination. We know that those mechanisms are in place, but it's not still effective. I think Sitlhou again, Makepeace she has written a piece in the Wire saying that there is a right to information being filed regarding this. Regarding the efficiency of the legal and the administrative mechanisms that's in place in universities, the UGC has asked the universities to submit their action taken reports on their action taken reports to submit what all are the action that the university is being taken. And through an RTI, the information was out saying that only 145 universities have responded to the UGC regarding this action taken reports. Out of 800 universities, only 145 universities have responded to UGC. So that is what their accountability is. So, and also only half of the universities have enabled the web page to lodge a complaint for against the discrimination that is existing by the SCST students in the campuses. So that is the sad state of affairs about the legal or about the administrative mechanism that is in place, which is not at all functional. And also the universities have a kind of a lukewarm approach towards that, towards the mechanism that is in place. So why am I highlighting this point? Is because there is only to reiterate the significance of Rohit Vemula Act. We've been discussing Rohit Vemula Act since, ever since Rohit Vemula's incident happened, and a lot of the activists or the academicians, a lot of sympathizers have been discussing that we need to formulate and implement a Rohit Vemula Act, which is been somehow been at halt. It's not being taken forward. But very recently, especially just after the IIT incident, I've been in touch with some of the Dalit activists, and they've been saying that they are pushing that Rohit Vemula Act, and especially Rachelle Bharathi and his institution, Center for Dalit Studies in Hyderabad, they are formulating that act, and then they have told me that they are actually pushing that act, and which is very, very important, especially at this point of time. Rohit Vemula Act is significant in some other ways also, because most of the administrative or legal mechanisms that are in place, it's just it's not penalizing the perpetrators. We are this mechanism that are in place, it's not, it doesn't contain any kind of provision to criminalize the behavior or punish the culprits. So here comes the significance of Rohit Vemula Act. If we are implementing the Rohit Vemula Act, we can criminalize the behavior of the perpetrators within the campuses, and we can also include the provisions to punish those culprits who are perpetuating discrimination within the university. So in that way, Rohit Vemula Act is very, very important, so that we can include the provision to criminalize the behavior. For example, in IIT, that bloody bastard remark, it's been considered as a misbehavior of a faculty, or it considered as an administrative misbehavior, faculty's misbehavior. So we need to criminalize that behavior. That is very, very important. That comes the significance of Rohit Vemula Act. We all know that as far as the female students are concerned, we know Nirbhaya Act is there. We know Sexual Harassment Act is there. These all are the acts that are criminalizing the behavior against the against the girls. For example, whether it's stalking or staring, this all been criminalized, and then that is being made a punishable offense, and that is also without having a bail. So we need to, in that way, we can say that this the girls in the university campuses are somehow, somewhere are protected, but not the SC/ST Dalit Bahujan students. That's something that we have to discuss. So Rohit Vemula Act would be another solution, that so that to some extent we can halt the kind of discrimination that is existing in the campuses. We need to criminalize the behavior. We need to make this behavior punishable. That's very, very important. We have to really work towards implementing the Rohit Vemula Act. And that is my third point. And the fourth point, which I would like to make here, maybe probably the last point, because I don't want to take much time for the other co-panelists also. What is, the broadly, if you look at the existing problem, what I think is that, there is one factor that we keep on denying, that, the power positions, or, in terms of the political power. If you look at even IIT's incident, lot of people in power, for example, the Ministry of Social Justice, they have taken cognizance of the matter. But after that, we are not seeing any kind of an action from their side. And what is very, very important is that the power positions actually control everything. Even the second point that I have made earlier, that overrepresentation of Savarnas in Indian universities. The overrepresentation of Savarna in universities is the result of the political power that being dominated by the Savarnas, because you all know that in most of the university campuses, the appointments, whether it's faculty appointments or whether it's administrative appointments, are all done by the political parties. We cannot neglect the fact that there is a kind of a political patronage over academic institutions. Because of this political patronage of the academic institutions, most of the faculties or the people who are occupying the administrative positions are the bootlickers of this mainstream political party. So who is at the power? That's very, very important, and where we have to really look at the fact that we need to have more political parties, or we need to have power positions which believe in Ambedkarite ideology. Why am I saying this? Because we have seen how the mainstream political party like BJP's intervention in Rohit Vemla's case, we know how it has played out. We also, being a right-wing government, we know that that's something that been their behavior towards Dalit Bahujan students. And if you look at the left government, in Kerala, we all know that how the two Dalit minor girls being raped and murdered in Kerala, and there was a kind of a mishandling from the left government side. And we all know that even in very recently concluded assembly election, that mother of that two minor Dalit girls contested the election against the Pinarayi Vijayan, who is now the CM of the Kerala. So what I'm trying to say here is that whether it's right wing, whether it's left wing, whether it's centrist parties, there is a kind of a lack of empathy and sympathy towards Dalit Bahujans. We need to promote those political parties who believe in Ambedkarite ideology, so that they come to power, and so that they can make the life of the Dalit Bahujans livable. I think that's a broader point I want to make here, because we've been denying that we've been a supporter of Congress, Congress, left government or right government. So what we are missing out here is that we need to promote those political parties who really, really believe in Ambedkarite ideology, and which is very, very important, so that when the power is there, I think we can actually make a lot of changes. That's something that we've been missing. So these all are the points that I just wanted to highlight. One is that we need to create a lot of Dalit Bahujan organizations or network to create a kind of a solidarity and sense of security among our community students. And secondly, of course, we need to have a kind of reservation policies, which actually makes the academic institution more democratic. And of course, thirdly, we need to have a Rohit Vemla Act, which is, which could criminalize the behavior of the faculties within the academic institutions, and also which make the act that contains a provision to make their behavior punishable. That's very, very important. Of course, largely what I would like to say is that we need to have a kind of a political power that believes in kind of an Ambedkar ideology. I think that is my observation. Thank you so much for everyone to just patiently listen to me. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Rehna. Your video was not really coming up. You were not visible. But then audio was clear, but it was basically very intriguing. And I remember that some of us were discussing about the Rohit Act, which basically came up briefly immediately after the institutional murder of Rohit Vemula, but then that did not really materialize. So that's very, very important again, that a Rohit Act for the campus, campuses of higher education, or quote unquote top campuses, top university campuses of India is very important. And at times even, I wouldn't hesitate to say that criminalizing those offenses are also very, very important. Well, we now have got Tejendra back. Tejendra is with IIT Mumbai. I hope Tejendra can hear me, and Tejendra is with the APPSC IIT Mumbai. Again, a very important organization, those who were at the forefront to really you know foreground the problems of caste-based atrocities in the IITs, and especially since they are the IIT Mumbai, they are in IIT Mumbai. So the IIT Mumbai, and I have learned recently that in the Seema Singh atrocities case, I mean, in this whole Seema Singh episode, the Savarna IIT director has constituted a committee to investigate into the matter. But then we really do not know that how many of them in the committee are from the SC/ST communities. Those are actually the victims. So again, that's something which is very important. And Seema Singh, as she in the very beginning asserted that no one can really do anything to me, including the SC/ST commission, and she is sitting very comfortably in the IIT Kharagpur. I mean, she is still the faculty. She is neither being suspended, nothing. And here is a committee. Probably the committee is an IUS, as it is happening with the committees to deal with the SC/ST atrocities cases in the campuses of higher learning in India. So with these words, I'm really looking forward to Tejendra's presentation on what he is basically, I mean, on the IITs, because a lot of us, those are in the central universities, we really do not know what's going there. We of course know, since APPSCs are being formed in the universities in IIT Madras and Mumbai. I'm not really aware of the fact that whether there is a APPSC formation in IIT Kharagpur or not. Tejendra can tell me. But we are really looking forward to Tejendra's words. Tejendra, yeah.
Yeah, thanks Dr. Subhajit, and thanks to the Life of Science Forum for organizing this talk. It's a very troubled times when we are discussing this issue of caste discrimination within the elite campuses, and it is so I will start by taking some names like Rohit Vemla, Aniket Ambore, Fatima Latif, and Payal Tadvi. These are few names which we triggers in our body and mind that how caste discrimination is so much embedded in the elite institutions and as well as in the society. Because when Aniket Ambore died, he was 22-year-old student, and he faced derogatory remarks from his professors and discrimination often by his colleagues. And when he died, so IIT Bombay somehow they try to make a high-level committee without taking any outsider from the campus, which can be a part of their investigation committee. But those are the elite from the upper caste made the committee, and they made the a report which they have never published in the public domain, but shared with the family. So we never know that what was the cause and how deep they were uh, uh, seen this claim which were made by his family that due to a caste discrimination he got this in situation that he got to he reached that suicide kind of thing he has to do. And it's very it's a very traumatizing experience whenever we discuss such issue also, because what happens in IIT, if you are in the if you haven't qualified the IIT means, then they will put you in the 1-year preparatory course, and then they will teach you. And the same thing happens with the IIT Kharagpur students. So those students were not up to the mark of as the Brahminical system ask for you to do, because the whole education is made by them only. It is there is and there is no voice from the lower society, so that they categorize you in a certain category, and then they will try to teach you, and they will, and now in troubled times when society is facing, or whole world is facing a pandemic, in that times a professor like Seema Singh abused them with those very derogatory remarks, which I really don't want to utter. And it's heart wrenching that a student from the lower caste or marginalized section has to go through such experiences. And it is not that first time is happening. In case of, if you see Fatima Latif suicide, uh, she belongs from the IIT Madras. When she was died on November 9, 2019. So she also faced derogatory remarks from his professors, and discrimination by the professors on daily basis, and a kind of Islamophobia uh, she has faced, that was that cannot be imagined, because it is not the caste, the Islamophobia, the hate against the culture, the different religions and different minority students is very dominating thought in elite institutions. So so in same way, because it is happening, because there is a very less representation of a marginalized section like scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, or even the OBC have a very because if you see a data where a sanction capacity for IIT Kharagpur for OBC or SC/ST professor in total is uh, was something 1,203, but there is only for that particular sanctions, there is only 8 scheduled caste professors are there in current times. So including both categories, there is sanction capacity is 1,023, and in same way in IIT Bombay also there is a capacity of sanction 1,034, but there is only 5 scheduled caste professor there. So in same way, if I read this data, the inference comes that there is very less representation of minority in the elite campus. So and the politics within the campus also get impacted by the Brahminical notion which we see and face in the society every day actually. So Brahminical forces are very dominant within the campus. So they have in IIT Bombay. I can share some of the tools which they have. Like in every mess they have a Jan counter mess, a very special kind of, so that nobody other than Jan cannot take the food from them. And what happened in the Hindu festivals or pujas, what happened, they, so the majority which belong from the Hindu community, they will do their puja very, openly. But if somebody from the minority wants to celebrate Ambedkar, has to, for like our organization, is suppose that we want to arrange any kind of talk within the campus related to the Ambedkar or Periyar. So we have to go through a lot of restrictions and hurdles by the administration. Many of time we don't have a grant a permission by the administration also. So there are, so one side of people, those who comes from the uh, upper class caste background, they have all the support from the within the system, and they can do anything. So with the impunity, Seema Singh, the way she had said those words, she was very aware that the society in which we are living, she is not going to punish. So right now in my current knowledge, IIT Kharagpur have made a high-level committee which in taking this incident in their account and examining the, but what is the a panel is and how many people are from the scheduled caste, or so that the accountability can be uh, measure if any judgment comes. So it is not there. So it is a brahmanization of elite institution like IITs is a part of a same Hinduization process which we witness in our daily to daily interaction. And caste violence is very rampant in elite institution. It is not that educated professor who had foreign degree would be untouched by the caste biases. And the caste is very in my terms, I see a very soul of modern Hindu society that exists within the uh, system as well as outside the system. And you can't picture the atrocities through which they perpetuate actually. And the challenge is uh, a current society which we are saying that the organization and arrangement of social hierarchy within this caste society is so strangled within each other that often caste atrocities may not be acknowledged by those the society itself, because it's so much normalized by the society itself from the thousands of years of practice. So uh, and it is very uh, disheartening to see such experience faced by the students from the marginalized, because one side this constitution which talks about secularism, where people should not get discriminated on the basis of religion, but Fatima Latif got discriminated and she faced religious discrimination. And because of that, in early life people has to take such a drastic step which they should not. So it is it is it is our our responsibility, like we should talk about in as much as possible within the elite institutions. And uh, and the challenge is, uh, there are challenges, but we need to somehow uh, manage also that how we can um, minimize or normal those discrimination. And people very I haven't I have uh, I know that people don't want to speak in open spaces, and that's the way it is happening, and it is going to be happen. uh, and the talks happens in the campuses, and we try to do but uh, the institution of suicide is not less than the murder, because the whole society make such circumstances outside the society, or then within the society, within the institution also, that they has to go through such drastic they has to go through the such experience and then take such drastic steps like suicide. So it's not that they have taken the suicide, it's a institutional murder by those elite institutions, and they should held accountable for such atrocities or caste violences episodes basically. And it's a very it's not that that we a marginalized section would only get going to change the whole society. It is a responsibility of whole society, so that we can, you know, be up, be make people as a part of society. And the humiliation and annihilation of caste is not going to. So yeah, so I will conclude my discussion by saying that that Ambedkar has said that कि शिक्षित हो, संगठित और संघर्ष करो. तो जो शिक्षा हाँ का पहला मापदंड है, या एक चरण होता है जिसमें बच्चा यूनिवर्सिटी में जाता है, वहाँ पे ही अगर डिस्क्रिमिनेशन होगा, आई डोंट थिंक दैट then somewhere, that idea could be fulfilled, because Brahmin, the whole Hindu setup is going to discriminate you in every level, and people has to face that. So so we have to be educated by outside the campuses also, and we have to fight in as possible in numbers. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that interesting insights, Tejendra. Well, a lot of things are basically coming in my mind when I was listening to you. Basically, I was remembering Najib. Najib's missing from the campus, the quote unquote missing from the campus of from the national capital, let's say that, and how things are, and then in number of lower caste students are committing suicides and being otherized. So basically this is as you were saying. Just I'll take 30 seconds and try to articulate this, that what Tejendra basically finished, that this whole idea of educate, agitate, and organize by Baba Saheb Ambedkar. So the first point he is trying to say is educate, and this is where the Brahminical system comes up and stops you to get really educated, stops you to really enter into the higher education spaces. This is basically the Brahminical settlers attitude, where these Brahminical settlers, the Savarna settlers, settled and gatekeep in a way where they keep on asserting you with the so-called idea of reservation, which is in a way nothing but asserting their upper casteness, the very Savarna superiority syndrome. And this is again a kind of Brahminical notion to otherize, to really discourage with this toxic idea of merit. Well, let me now invite Makepeace. Sitlhou, she's been a journalist who is covering a very important region of the country. So Makepeace has come up with many pieces and have produced documentaries, and a known face to all of us, and we have been reading her. So I request Makepeace to really give a presentation.
All right. Okay. I am audible now, right?
Yes, you are.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for giving me the floor. I'm really not too much into very long monologues, so I'm going to keep it fairly short and mostly kind of centered around my reportage. I think someone, the first speaker in this webinar, sort of very rightly put it that we've been kind of going around the problem for a really long time. I mean, although I know that a lot of us still feel somewhere that this needs to be explained from point A, because a lot of people are not as yet caught up to even defining who's a Dalit or who's a Bahujan and all those things. But I think it's important for us to already, at least at some level, really start moving towards a more solutions-oriented dialogue, because then for the rest who are still kind of catching up, there's a lot of reading material. I mean, a lot of the panelists here have written extensively on these issues, and I think there's enough rudimentary, there's enough dummies guide for people to kind of catch up on that. So I'm just going to be drawing from my reportage, I mean, which is again very limited. I'd like to kind of flag that from the beginning, but still I can speak a little bit from also my own lived experience, which in many ways guided in the way that I wrote about the issue, as well as the way that I understood and spoke to several sources, both university professors, students, as well as parents of students who've been lost to suicides because of a centuries-old discrimination practice, which might I add, for whatever reason, is still defended to death even today. As some sort of a misunderstood, system that otherwise was enshrined in some kind of its own democracy or something of that sort. So, I mean, anyway, moving beyond, a lot of these defensive remarks, I think I'd just like to say that the thing with caste discrimination in campus, how it's so important, for us to be having this dialogue at any point, and especially now, is actually defining even what is discrimination. The thing is that, of course, we've got the SC/ST POA Act, and in my personal opinion, of course, but I would like to sort of, again, put the disclaimer that I have my own limited research in this, and someone who comes with more sort of extensive, thorough, research, as well as having reported on it, might have a different view. And I'm really, really keen on hearing that. But I do personally think, as it stands, the SC/ST POA Act is fairly watertight. There, of course, have been attempts at its dilution, which is something that I have also, again, personally, protested, and whatever. It's something that I've been very against. But as far as just the sort of the provisions of the Act goes, I do think that even in modern day implementation, it doesn't really fall short on the various ways that discrimination sort of manifest in the way that they roll out. I think I was watching this movie the other day, and again, it was something about it was really a horror movie, actually. So, but nevertheless, it was about this gay couple, and one half of the gay couple was a black guy, and then it was a white guy, right? And they move into this sort of like a rural-ish suburbia. And, and then this guy, the black guy, was talking about some kind of an off feeling that he has about his neighbors. And, and I think that he was kind of the very usual, in the very typical way, being gaslit by his partner, that, well, maybe you're just overthinking it and you're speaking too much from trauma and things like that. And the thing that he said in response to me, that was quite interesting. He said that, it's not like people change. They just get better at hiding their prejudices, their biases. So I think even with that in mind, where people have become surely more diplomatic. I mean, there is this whole work language which has taken, a life of its own. I mean, people feel, I don't know, under siege by it, but at the same time, a lot of people are so nuanced and are so well versed in the language that they can probably beat any of us in this panel who really come with actual lived experiences. But in any of these so-called modern day circumstances, and I'm especially speaking about white collar spaces, and that's where the university really kind of, assumes a lot of importance here. So the thing that I'm also sort of getting at, and I think that was a lot on my mind while working on the Wire story. At the time, I must state that I was with Amnesty International India. I was a researcher and a campaigner there. And this was the thing that I wanted to, this was the last of my reports that I worked on while I was with Amnesty. And yeah, it was sort of very, kind of, it followed soon after I did a little bit of reporting on the first death anniversary of Rohit Vemula in 2017. So, but the thing that I think a lot of, while I was trying to kind of, while I was doing my research and while I was trying to scope down, I think most people would understand who come from a research background, and especially a human rights research background, proving discrimination on campus can often be, riddled with a lot of hurdles. And that's largely because of the fact that, that discrimination may not really necessarily be overt and especially physical. So I think, again, another understanding, a very basic understanding that we have of discrimination, particularly caste discrimination in India, is that it's, it's got to do with not being able to draw water from a well, not being able to wear like your slippers while crossing through a Brahmin village or something like that, or, ensuring that your whatever shadow does not fall on a Brahmin priest or something of that sort. So it's very overt. It's very kind of rather easier to prove. But when it comes to more white collar spaces, I think there have been, even with all of the extremely, tragic deaths that have happened, often the difficulty has been in being able to say that it is this act, it is these words that have really sort of led to someone's, suicide. And I guess that was also a huge debate that was raging, even in Rohit Vemula's case. Although, I mean, that was something that was so clear in the day, and without an ounce of a doubt about what were the kind of circumstances that led to his death. But in most cases, and in many cases where the discrimination is very subtle, the discrimination is very relational. That's often been a challenge for many of these committees that have been formed in the aftermath of these two suicides. So that's one of the things that I kind of really deliberated on. I tried to sort of nitpick on, on instances which would clearly give out that sense of like, what alienates people, what tends to otherize people, otherize students, but I think I felt, I remember, I can share this much, that even at the time working on that report, as someone who's essentially working or trying to kind of, put this in the human rights framework, it was quite a challenge, because we just needed, like, our bar of evidence was sort of not, meeting the standards that is typically observed in human rights violations, or what is considered or what is qualified as human rights violations. So even while reading through the various committee reports, etc., I saw a lot of good recommendations being put forth by the committees that were formed. Yet, I think while I did follow up with the universities at that time, I spoke to the professors of all the universities where suicides had happened, and also asked them about what was the change that happened after this committee was formed and the recommendations were made, And I think all across, which included even a place like Jawaharlal Nehru University, JNU, the bastion of very, very upper caste liberal politics in this country, and of course the target of of a very right-wing government of the day. They also sort of, it had no impact that Muthu Krishnan's death had happened at a time as wired up and as volatile as following the death of Rohit Vemula. So I think that's just in itself speaks a lot. It just speaks ounces. It speaks volumes of our complete inept, again, when I say our, I would like to say mostly a very Savarna dominated, faculty or administration at the helm of these things. Let's also, I think, for what it's worth, let's also call out the fact that the institute, or where, or exactly the faculty where Muthu Krishnan himself was studying, is led by a very, very renowned historian who is right now projecting herself to be a victim of this so-called fascist government, which is also as which is also which is in fact perhaps more Brahmanical, if not equally Brahmanical as the so-called liberal forces in our country. So I think these are things that are a bit inconvenient for most people to kind of digest, because it doesn't fall. I mean, caste is one of those topics in this country that doesn't fall neatly into a very left or right sort of a discourse. It permeates across. So yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that I remember, like, I mean, kind of coming away with from that report, that I mean, it was a sobering reminder of just, you know, how little, you know, accountability that institutions, and institutions by institutions, I'm talking about people in these institutions, feel towards these kind of, you know, sort of these kind of institutional deaths that happen. Other than that, I also wanted to sort of, you know, speak, like I said, through this report, one of the things that I've also, I like to share a little anecdote, because you know, while again, like I said, the research process of this report was quite a tumultuous one, because again, there weren't really, apart from these committee reports that were there weren't too many, how do I say, there weren't too many civil society reports, or for that matter, even human rights kind of reports to like lean on. There were a few, you know, NCDHR reports to kind of, you know, again refer to, but nothing which were really sort of, you know, mounted by some of the leading sort of civil society organizations, as well as international organizations that operate in India. I mean, I must here state, for whatever benefit it might be, that there was zero think tank reports on this pattern of, well, abuse that's been happening in institutions for the longest time. So again, since we tend to often rely on think tank reports for, you know, everything from foreign policy to, like, I don't know, national policy on education, health, vice versa, all those things. But this is something that was woefully amiss in these places. So yeah, but one of the things that I did find challenging was, you know, who would be the best person to speak to at these places, you know, like, who would be the most reliable to speak to. Of course, the easy thing was to speak to the professors who led these committees, these fact-finding committees, right? But I remember at the time, my supervisor had suggested to me that instead of, I mean, while I could also speak to students, and that's all fair, that's all, like, that would be fair as well. One of the things that he suggested, which I thought was very invaluable to the story that I did, was speaking to professors who were not necessarily involved necessarily in the fact-finding committees, or for that matter, who were not, you know, who were just basically had been in the departments for the longest time, who had spent like maybe even decades perhaps in those departments, to be able to see across generations, across batches, how things had been, and if there were any sort of changes, even in the patterns of you know, exclusion, abuse, not just about changing from you know, bad to like worse, or bad to like better, perhaps, right? So that really was very, very interesting. I think that was a very good suggestion that I kind of felt that it helped to really cement what had been each institution's own pattern, so to speak. So one of the things I like, you know, I like to kind of just cite over here is someone that I spoke to in IIT Bombay. And of course, IIT Bombay is where the Aniket Ambore incident had happened. You know, so again, and I think especially very relevant to this particular discussion, because we're talking about Seema Singh, we're talking about this whole, you know, the preparatory classes, which is again more or less exclusively meant for people coming, I mean, for the students from the reserved categories. And Aniket Ambore himself was, you know, sort of struggling in that sort of whatever it's called, 0 year or something like that, before the first year of the engineering that starts off. So I remember at the time that because it's interesting, because this class in itself, this 0 year, if you will, is seen as both a helping hand as a rather institution's you know, way of basically, you know, saying that we have done a bit, that we are starting this preparatory class for these kids, so that, you know, we don't exclude them and we can improve our you know, overall like sort of representation in these institutions and all of that. But at the same time, the attitude remains no different, right? And that is kind of in many ways proven by Seema Singh, who has ironically written all these, pieces or something about, none of which I've read, but nevertheless has written something about, being a very, very sort of, a very sensitive professor and someone who's very, very clued into the needs of students from reserved categories. So the thing that I remember that the IIT Bombay professor had told me at the time was, that this whole preparatory class is just another like form of this upper caste generosity, just helping these students. But in any way, it does not change. In any way, it does not change the way that that the teachers really kind of approach the students. As in, it hasn't really kind of in any way shifted the attitude and what having these students would really can really bring to the institutions, right? So it's especially, I suppose, in institutions like IIT, or for that matter, medical institutions and all of that, medical colleges. It's a very strict box that has been created for all students to kind of fall into that, because it's science, it's very objective, it's very clear cut. There's no room for expanding its whatever many margins or whatever it is. I mean, it's supposed to, like, people's lives depend on it. We're talking about high packet jobs that you can get based on these degrees, right? So the attitude becomes even more rigid in these spaces. But I think that, to me, that the thing where she talked about this upper caste generosity, that made a lot of sense, because what we often consider as someone taking a step towards difference or taking a step towards inclusion is really often a self-serving exercise, not really meant to help the students. It may not even be really quite designed to kind of, pull the students up. And more importantly, I would really measure I think what would be really good is to have some sort of a baseline as well as an end line assessment of the students who go for this preparatory class for the preparatory year, and what's their level of entitlement being in these institutions. And I mean, I think the results of that assessment will pretty much, for some of us, affirm what we already know, but also will blow the minds of most people who believe this is some kind of a life-changing thing for students and things. I know that I've had nieces who've gone through this preparatory class, and I can just say that the sense that I've got from them is of complete indebtedness. They feel very indebted being in this space, that that this is something that was given to them. It was not something that they deserve. It was not something that they had the right to. So I think that in being in that space, being in that mindset, already makes you extremely, extremely vulnerable to, of course, the very, very, very humane, perhaps even casteist ideas and prejudices of many of these professors. Of course, the other thing also one should mention about is the very representation of the faculties in these spaces, which is woefully imbalanced, which remains woefully imbalanced even today. So I think these are some of the reflections that I sort of had, from my at least reportage. The one thing that I'd just like to quickly add here, I'm sure I'm kind of running out of time by now, but I mean, I think I was asked at one point that what should be the media's role in this, how can the media report these instances, these stories better? For one, I think suffice to say that don't just report deaths, don't just wait for people to take their own lives, because that's a very, very, I mean, that's a very, very last end point for someone to reach that point of desperation before you take notice. And I think it reflects very poorly on journalists as well, that we wouldn't really take instances like Seema Singh as seriously as unless, as opposed to a situation that some student from that batch had committed suicide or something of that sort. So I think that in itself, we need to be far more tuned to what is happening in these institutions. I mean, especially the reporters who are on the education beat, follow up on these committee recommendations, follow up on the data that the UGCs can provide through RTI or otherwise through your sources, but follow up before someone else, like, someone takes their life, because that's not what we should be waiting for before we react.
Okay, is that so you have wrapped it up, Makepeace?
Yeah, that's the short of me.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much. Quite a lot of insights coming from somebody who's been working in this domain and laying bare the whole the underbelly, the casteist underbelly of the of these higher education institutes. Having said this, I actually would agree with and we have been actually pondering over it, as Makepeace mentioned, that providing discrimination in the campus, proving the discrimination in the campus is very hard. Again, like whether it's happening physically, it's not like the way untouchability is happening. You are not allowed to sort of enter into that area where the Savarnas live, or the Brahmins live particularly. So it's very, very difficult. Other day, I remember there was some initiative to collect the names of these casteist professors. There were some of marginalized caste students. They were making a list of these professors, so they could make a list of some 70 or 60 professors. But I actually told them that I have at least 300 names in my mind, but then of course not 300, or it can go up to 500 names, okay, of the professors in various institutes wherever I had gone. So but you can't prove it. So but if you talk to them, you will realize that how casteist they sound really, and that reflects when they teach, when they sort of mark the students from the coming from the marginalized communities, and how they really talk to them outside the classes, even in the online spaces like the social media spaces. So how they appreciate even the writing of the recommendation pattern. So it's everywhere. You can't rather, so this is again very hard to prove. So this kind of underlying casteist behavior again, and also on JNU, which there's this interesting point that is being made by Makepeace. I think she was probably, let's not publicize the name of that center, but then I'm really, I can't resist myself, but I'm naming it because I have been there in JNU for more than 4 years. So it's this School of Social Sciences, which is otherwise eulogized as a very, very liberal heaven, liberal social science heavens, liberal humanities and social science heaven. But again, the way casteism is being sort of perpetuated there in across that, it's very difficult to prove. I have heard there were I had roommates in the hostel, those who were in CHAs, in CPAs and other institutes. So they would come and tell me that they went with a topic on the model of caste discrimination, but then their guide sort of slightly changed it. So it shouldn't be really a Savarna centric. So when a student or a research scholar is trying to sort of interrogate the way Savarnas are perpetuating caste discrimination, so they will sort of try to modify that topic and will say, okay, let's stick to this whole whole annihilation of caste or caste, the normal topics, and they will keep this whole caste discrimination interrogation point to them, and they will be writing a book on subaltern studies and things like that. So it's very known to all, and they sort of keep the way, in a very woke way, of course, that how the entire anti-caste struggle is happening, and then towards the end they will be concluding that it is basically a struggle for the identity. So the anti-caste struggles are basically reduced and essentialized as the identity struggle. So this is again, sort of relegating to the immediate identities of the marginalized caste. Okay, so thanks once again to Makepeace for that interesting presentation. I can see Professor Dilip Mandal, Dilipda has joined, so I welcome Dilipda for joining. I'll come back to you in some time, but before that, let me invite Riya. Riya is again is a very senior doctoral scholar in Ambedkar University in Delhi, and she has been at the forefront to sort of investigate caste-based atrocities, and she's been working on at the grassroots level, and she's also in the core leadership team of Dalit Women Fight. Those are doing fantastic work. So I without much ado, I request Riya to really go ahead and.
Hi, Subhajit. Thank you.
Riya, you are not basically visible. Maybe you need to video is. If it's okay with you, then I guess.
Yeah, I'm just comfortable without the video, but.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Now it's fine. Yeah. Hi. Yeah.
Oh, hi. So basically, I'm going to talk about two prestigious institutions where I'd spent most of my academic life. So one has been TIS Mumbai, and another is CWDS, which runs a collaborative PhD course with Ambedkar University, Delhi. So I did my MA from TIS and pursued my MPhil and PhD from CWDS AUD. So both of these institutions are held high in esteem for the academic credentials of the faculty members who teach here. They are extremely radical, they are progressive, they are feminists, and they're leftist. Some have been a part of women's movement in India, and some have also claimed to be themselves to be anti-caste crusaders as well. So not only they have all these qualities, in my experience, I also think that they're hyper-casteist as well. So what we see in cases of caste discrimination is a new pattern where that has emerged. However, unfortunately, for something to qualify as caste discrimination, there has to be a higher degree or intensity of harassment, or a very clearly visible or verbal caste abuse, like people look for abuse that would qualify to be caste atrocity. However, the pattern of harassment and means of gatekeeping has also evolved over past 10 years. So the forms of exclusion and abuse that we see now are more subtle and largely everyday in nature. It is a very normalized part of a classroom. There is an everydayness to it. Like there is no one incident that happens, like big incident that is casteist. However, what we see is that it keeps on building every day. In everyday classroom, these caste practices or behaviors which are discriminatory are in form of humor or in form of subtle insults are being shared or thrown on Dalit students. So in my experience, while navigating or pursuing a case of caste discrimination, the war we fight is largely about endlessly explaining what just happened qualifies to be casteist and why. And in return, what we get is a constant denial, and more often in the progressive spaces. Like what we saw in IIT Kharagpur cases, that the Seema Singh was like bluntly outspoken, and she actually said out the words, like she said bastard. However, I'm still unsure whether the committee will qualify this as caste abuse, because they might say it's an abuse but not a caste abuse. So what we see is that in a progressive space, they deny, like even if we produce an evidence, we explain it to them, we bring all kinds of explanatory evidences that are needed to support our argument. There's a constant denial from them that we are from these particular departments who are fighting for equality, or who are famous, or who are standing up for women's right. How are you even accusing us to be of something like a caste discrimination? So their denial also comes in a very powerful manner, that we are left aghast that what more can we do to actually explain or seek some sort of a relief for what we are experiencing. So I totally disagree with people who say that, upper caste people or these faculty members need to be educated, because I believe that they clearly know what they do. All I can agree is that they are repeated offenders and they just don't want to, change, or they don't care about what they do to Dalit students in the university. So gender studies departments are largely dominated by women. Most of the students are women. Most of the faculty members are women. So, and obviously the department is supposed to be more sensitive, which is building pedagogy around discrimination and talking about women's rights. However, these spaces cannot be assumed to be free of caste discrimination. My 8 year of experience comes from this department. I will bring forth two of my experiences out of many other experiences to explain myself further. So like back in 2012, I was in TIS Mumbai doing my master's. So there was a course on caste, class, and gender. So we were to be evaluated on an assignment where we had to write our own caste experiences. So I don't know how much wrong could we go in writing our own caste experiences while we are in our MA degree. So I chose to write an assignment on how my parents prepared me before I could enter university, like before from passing out from school to enter my graduation. So in this assignment, that professor gave me 4 on 10. And my other colleagues and classmates who were also from DBA group were also graded less, or some even failed with grades like 3.6, 3.8 out of 10. So I was given 4 on 10. So I applied for a revision of a grade and wrote an assignment again. And then in the reevaluation or in the fresh assignment where she graded me 4.5 in my second attempt. So at CWDs and AUD, there's another experience where one of the faculty member told me that, SC/ST students should be officially given 7 years to complete their PhD because they just cannot finish in 5. So the general students can have a time frame of 5 years, and SC/ST students, just because they need a lot of assistance and they're not academic enough, so why not we officially announce a 7-year program for them? So this clearly had shaken me, and this showed their, prejudice against SC/ST students and people coming from DB communities, that they have this prejudice that we just cannot finish a course in a given time frame. Reason being that, they think that we have language issues, we need more training in academic language, which I think stands equal for all students, because research degrees, all the students who enter research degrees are doing research for the first time. And there have been students in my course who had been Brahmins and upper caste and have studied in regional medium schools, basically cleared their class 12th in Hindi. I don't see that the faculty members hold similar prejudice. Rather, I see them more cooperative and supporting them in learning English and developing on their thesis. Whereas when it comes to DBA students, the faculty members just give up on them, stating this reason, they will take much more time to learn, and they're just being on their own and not much supervision is given to them. Along with this, during my MPhil, a tribal student was compelled to drop out of the course because she was told numerous times that, her language is not academic enough and she's not good enough to carry on with an academic degree of this kind. So all of this was happening informally, telling her when the professor would meet her, or just on a text message. So knowing this friend who was a friend, so she shared this all with all of us, and then we tried to take it up, and we said that we'll help you out, we'll work together, we'll develop on your work, no problem. But she herself felt so much down, and she felt, she convinced herself that she's not good enough, and she eventually one day stopped coming to the university. So in such cases, we see that, even if there are groups to support, even if there are friends to comfort, the people in power, the faculty members, have so much of power over students to make them feel so low about themselves that they have no other option to just give up. There have been these professors who are these fancy looking leftist professors who would not leave a chance to even comment on clothes and appearance of research students who come from DBA communities, and this is extremely ridiculous. This happens in the so-called prestigious universities in India. Both CWDS established in 85 and AUD established in 2008 still do not have SC/ST cell in place. And my experience of taking up cases of caste discrimination is that university will first not take up the complaint at all. It will call it a petty issue of students fighting with each other, or they'll just term it as ideological differences between two political students. And if eventually they make up a committee, then it would hardly have a representation of a faculty member from SC/ST group. And even like, we have passed that phase where there is no representation. So they will actually put a SC or a ST, a faculty member on a committee. But since we know that, there are the representation of SC/ST faculty members in a campus is really low, and a number of professors, associate professors on the SC seat are also low. So even the faculty members who are in the committee, they also undergo a lot of pressure of, they just can't afford to be unbiased. So I would not say that, they play against the students, or they are unable to produce a sort of a report which goes in our favor. But in my experience, the reports in most of the committees that are the cases I've taken up, the report tends to be very neutral. It doesn't tend to hold the accused, accountable. Somehow there is some pacifier that comes in between, until unless the case is like of a physical or really high intensity violence between two students. So when they also bring in our people, I think there's also a pressure on our people that how can they be uprightly so for example, if they're writing something in our favor, they're contested in a committee where others are also sitting. It's not a complete SC/ST committee that sits there who is free to express what they feel. They are also intimidated while sitting in a committee room. So I believe that, this Bombay has a very good model of SC/ST cell where all the members are from the community, and they can actually come up with judgments which are in favor of DBA students. However, these temporary committees that are set up in universities, they have failed to actually do any good to students who come up with their grievances or cases. To conclude, I would say that even the SC/ST Prevention of Atrocities Act, it is inefficient in tackling the new forms of atrocity that take place in like urban areas and academic institutions. Because if we see the list, it enlists largely the crimes which are still predominant in rural and semi-urban areas. So I would not hesitate to say that the present list of POA Act just does not address the crimes that are being committed on SC and ST students in the university spaces. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Riya, for those interesting observations. I remember that how, in fact, the urban spaces, especially the university spaces, are being touted or being sort of glorified or eulogized by the liberals, of course, the Savarna liberals, that these are, of course, the caste-less spaces. But of course, because they say that they have quote unquote transcended those spaces because they have engaged with modernity. So these are kind of modern spaces. So these are casteless, but of course, the amount of trauma, humiliation that goes, with the Savarna definition of merit is havoc. So, and Seema Singh is one out of many, probably millions right after 1947 or before that, because since it started from Vedic age. So anyways, I once again thank Riya for the kind of work that you do and for the presentation, of course. Thanks for coming. Please stay back. We'll have a question and answer session. Now let me sort of invite our next speaker, Shalini. Shalini, of course, is is currently probably completing the PhD in life sciences at University of Hyderabad. Of course, she's also looking at a network of neurons in grasshoppers, which are possibly involved in communication. So without much ado, let me request Shalini to give her presentation. Yeah,
Yes.
Shalini.
Hi. Hello, everyone. I'm Shalini. And thank you for inviting me to talk today. And and it's been really nice listening to everyone. And I feel very, very important things have been said already. And I want to say that I wanted to start with this. What kept coming to my head when I heard this was we have not come here to die. It was a very powerful statement made in the movie, the documentary, which was based on Rohit. And I just really want to say we have not come here to die because, when I heard what was said in the class, and the first thing that came to my mind was, I repeat again here, that language-wise, I've been sort of like, fluent simply because I live in this Hyderabad and I went to an English medium school. So the first thing that came to my head was, oh my God, I didn't have to go through that. That's the first privilege that I thought of to myself when I heard that. And the other thing I thought of was, I don't know if I would have survived if I was in that classroom. Because given my anxieties and how worrisome I am about performance, basically performance anxiety, because you have to perform, right, in multiple ways. So these are the two things that came to my mind. And another thing that came to my mind was how this is like, it's very similar the way schooling or whatever was being done there, the stressed talk by the professor, is that it felt like, how children are taught at homes for tuitions, especially in India, or in some schools, how teachers behave in a classroom full of small children, because children are not going to remember everything and go and like, tell parents, or it's not going to be a big deal, basically. And somewhere we know that children need to be corrected, so kuch bhi chalta hai, whatever makes it work. That's the assumption with the Indian education, actually, and I have issues with that already. And that's what I felt when I saw this preparatory class for students who are already needing help, and help to study, that I've come here to study. I've come here to study, to educate myself, not to die of insults, of shame, of all this other bunjas that comes with it. And I would have felt, I'm so happy that such a class is there. And, because if I was a student having to do all this, my biggest concern would have been, oh my God, I have to now study things which are not which are being instructed in a medium I'm not good at, and then it's being taken care of. I would have felt like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, like It's a Very Wonderful World, Alice in Wonderland kind of jazz, like everything is taken care of, it seems like, and you go and then this is happening. God knows what someone would have been through to get till that point where you even enter such a campus, like an IIT campus, right? It's a lot of stress. I don't have to talk about the kind of stress people have to go through to crack through an IIT or any entrance for that matter. Because every entrance someone is cracking through, especially from the marginalized or other communities who find it difficult to enter such spaces. What are you offering them in the name of inclusivity, in the name of helping out this, that? We are entering these spaces and we are very grateful you're giving us your time, you're trying to understand. And the result is something else altogether. You're sitting there and like they are just telling you, just go back. You're not fit. You're unfit. And like, enough of that already. You're unfit. That's why you're giving us this class. And again, you're going to tell me to go away. Then how am I going to survive this degree? This is what I kept thinking when I heard this episode, actually. And then therefore I felt we have not come here to die. I would have felt like dying because I really would have, and no wonder many students commit suicide in these kind of high performance institutes, I feel. Because let's talk about the stress this professor felt. I'm extremely stressed because like I already said before, there is multiple stresses occurring when you're from the marginalized. I don't know, like if you're a woman, parents are not allowing you to go and stay here perhaps. And if I might not have food or money, I'm not belonging there, everything is tough, I don't know if I'll survive, I don't know if I will perform, and I will excel, hoping that I am going to excel, I'm here. And all of this other things I'm having to do, extra things, right? A lot more extra is there to do. There's hardly any time. I'm extremely stressed. And with that stress, I'm sitting in the classroom. This is not what I've come here for. That you are going to add more stress and tell me that this is not possible for you. And how are we going to talk about stressor of a grandparent's loss versus your stress of having to teach in a class? These are the kind of questions I kept arguing myself with. And I just wanted to say that. And I agree with everyone who has said before that the only reason these things happen, I feel, is because it's taken for granted. There is no criminalization. There is discrimination. It has the word criminal in itself to some extent, at least. But this criminalization is not there. We all know how harassment cases also keep going on campuses. Let's talk about that also. All these gendered experiences, which are harassment largely, and mostly people are getting away, at least. And because, it's very difficult, what I'm understanding it as is that this versus not having Rohit Act is that despite having a system which is going to help me sort of get some sense of justice, especially in a space like academia, where, when I started coming to campus during my master's, I felt, oh my God, this is a place where everyone is thinking of just what they want to do and not other things. And it's been very disorienting to realize it's actually the same like the rest of the world. It's just doing it in different ways. So I am coming here in academia and all this is happening, and how am I going to justify surviving here without finishing these degrees, with all these stressors, with all these mental problems anyways we face, and I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. So despite having these systems in place, women who are getting harassed, or anyone who is getting harassed for that matter, we know that it's falling into this due process kind of thing. So I don't know if we have SC/ST Atrocities Act happening, Rohit Act in place, and let us not even people don't even talk about the harassment that trans and queer people go through, and the mental health problems that stigmatizes everyone, and how that affects how you perform in campuses again. We don't even have things in place for these things. And I am continuously being told it's a very slow process. I mean, despite having some acts in place, it's still such a slow process that people are still getting away with things. So wherever they feel, we can get away, they are just exercising these things. So which is why I feel implementing Rohit Act is something we just cannot neglect. And therefore have more acts for every kind of discrimination that happens, because if not in academia, where else am I going to expect in the world that these kind of things are going to be thought about in a healthy way? I mean, my understanding of a campus or an institute space or an education space is a space where, people are liberating themselves of all these thoughts and kind of trying to come up with things that are going to be useful, not pull you down. This is one more sad thing that I have had to learn, that it is not what I thought it is. I'm also very naive, so it actually makes sense. And because I thought, all you need to do is study, focus, and that will take care of everything, and that's not enough. Another thing I wanted to say is that it feels like, another thing I thought of when I heard this was that, okay, so this is a classroom where she was supposed to help everyone, and she's finding it stressful to do this. And no one is talking about the stress that the students have to go through, listening to all of these kind of insulting remarks, and what kind of things happen to students who are struggling already to work. That it feels like it's a very mutual thing, not being able to help and not getting the help you need. I feel like if this is the situation and you're saying that, we are creating space for you to come and study with us, so that, we understand that you have these issues and therefore reservation and therefore but it looks like in practice it's not really happening. Everything which needs to be in place is in place, and despite all of this we have issues. So then I feel like, you just give us our own universities, just the same way you have universities just like that everywhere. Let us have some, marginalized universities, universities for marginalized people. We will function ourselves. We will teach how we need to teach what. I mean, at least it would be better, no? I'll employ people who want a job to teach, and who are willing to teach people the way it needs to be taught. That is, I mean, it might feel funny, but that's the only funniest but bestest solution I felt. And it feels sad that I even thought of such a thing, that the solution would be having your own universities, your own publishing houses, your own thing for everything, because these people are not getting it. And in the name of getting it, they're making it worse. This is not what I've come here for, and this is I've not come here to die. That's all I want to say. And bus, I want to stop with that. I mean, like, yeah, that's all I want to say.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shalini, for that intriguing thought. I mean, leaving us with that intriguing thought that we are not here to die. I mean, I'm going to sort of, stay with it.
Because again and again, whenever I talk about anything that happens in campuses, right, any sad thing, and the first thing is, if it's happening in campus, then where else can I expect? Because law fails us, obviously, in a lot of ways, and these are supposed to be these stalwart intellectual community, a clique, like very exclusive people who liberated, whatever. Like it has a lot of other meanings, right? And that other cloud, it just is invisible. It's very astounding for me.
Yeah, right.
So, and every time I feel, if you're going to keep doing this, like you're pushing us to die, and it looks like if another person doesn't die, then Rohit won't come. Like we have to keep dying or what? And I want to say we have not come here to die.
Yeah. That's again.
Only then you'll take us seriously. Like.
Yeah, as what really basically matters to them, not a Dalit who is alive, but a Dalit dead body, which is what they really want.
Just dead bodies, actually. A few dead bodies across the space. And I don't know. I'm sorry for talking like this, but it just feels like, to be taken seriously, something very dramatic has to happen.
Yes,
people need a lot of drama, I feel. And I just keep thinking, can we do this without all of this drama?
Yeah.
And you want us to be nice, right? Like,
yeah,
you want us to be nice.
This basically reminds me of, again, the university where you are now, where I was a student during from 2012, 10 to 12, and JNU, where you have ASA, you have BSF, the Bahujan Student Front, and in JNU you have UDSA, BAPSA. That I'm trying to tell you, the Dalit Bahujan Students Front, Dalit Adivasi Bahujan, the minority students front. Those are basically articulating their worldview, the alienation, and trying to sort of interrogate the institutional structure. But then these are also spaces where we talk a lot about caste-based discriminations. Also, these are those liberal bastions where the casteist mindset of the Savarna professors are articulated in a very, very subtle way, and you have, once you start talking to them in a very, very deep way on issues like merit, reservation, so it all comes out. So they just
every discussion is due process kind of discussion.
Yeah, so
it will be dissected. Like,
so they always would be like, would be looking at saying like a feminist, not like an intersectional feminist.
Exactly.
So yeah, I know. And
like how just now someone said, like,
I remember
discrimination is so difficult.
Yeah.
And that's what made me think that, yes, everything proving is so difficult, and I have to prove.
Yeah. So, and that is what is basically exported across the world, and caste has become a global phenomenon. And thanks to the Savarnas, that they have truly made the IITs, the universities, the top institutes, as just another kind of, I'm sorry to say, the caste society, within a blocked campus. Anyways, thank you so much, Shalini, for telling us those. And I understand, having coming from that background. So let me now invite Professor Dilip Mandal. Professor Mandal, of course, mm, is one of the most senior journalists in the country. He is one of them who sort of stormed the Twitter with the end casteism in IIT, and of course we all were there in Twitter, and we all started sort of holding the institutions accountable to suspend the casteist professor of IIT Kharagpur. And Professor Mandal is someone who has been interrogating, the Savarna domination in media, and of course he is also keenly watching what is going on in the university campuses. He is a keen observer. I met him in JNU, in Kolkata, in all the places. So I invite Professor Dilip Mandal to give his presentation. I'm really looking forward to you and many of our attendees.
Thank you, Subhajit. I was busy with some health emergency in the family. So I was listening to the presentation of Shalini, and I just felt like crying, because actually I survived the turbulent 90s when Mandal Commission was implemented in 1990, and I was in Delhi, and everyone in my classroom, teachers and friends, everybody was saying, "Acha, tum Mandal Commission wale Mandal ho, tumhari wajah se itni problem hai." So just you can imagine, it's such a frightening experience to go to Delhi University, that if somebody sees ask for my identity and all that, what will happen, whether I survive or not, because it was such a violent time. So, and I've also seen in 2006 anti-reservation movement in Delhi, how upper caste, so-called whatever upper caste, they vacated the hospitals, thrown out all the patients in names and Safdarjung and many hospitals, and it was never documented how many of the patients actually died and all that. I was there as reporter and all that I have seen. So yeah, it's very difficult to be a Dalit Bahujan student in Indian academic space, and I was just thinking what was must be going on in the mind of that class of Seema Singh. And Professor Ratan Lal of Delhi University asked कि कैसे student हैं, क्यों चुप रह गए, बोले क्यों नहीं? But I think this is not the right question to ask, because especially in STEM courses, the problem is that some sort of overt casteism is still being practiced. In social sciences, it's more covert, more nuanced, and some sort of sensitization has happened, but still it's not like that. I've seen in JNU there is many of the students there, I've seen them collecting data, how in the Viva or oral examinations and all that, how discriminatory is the whole practice, because at that time 30% of marks were there for Viva courses, and especially SSTs and OBC students, and also minorities, they were given less marks despite getting high and good marks in written part. So that is the problem. We all know, and there has been many reports, especially Thorat committee report and Mungrekar committee reports are there, how to go about it, what are the methods and ways to mitigate this problem. So yeah, those solutions are there, but it hasn't been implemented. That is the problem. I think the whole issue is about navigating this space and how to survive. Yeah, the question is about survival, because earlier these institutions were like agraharas or Brahmin colonies. All the students and all the teachers, they were from the same stock, and they actually thought that these spaces are for them only. Even if you see the 1931 census report of Maharashtra, you will find that around 7,000 Brahmins, they mentioned their primary language, first language is English, whereas only one Dalit who mentioned English as his male as his language. I will try to find out that page of the census so that I can post it in the group. So that cultural capital and the social capital connections and networking they have used, and they have translated into the education, or whatever you say, intellectual capital, and they are now pretending as if they have become casteless. तो वो ये कह सकते हैं कि जाति कहाँ है, हम तो जाति नहीं करते, हमने तो अपने मेरिट से जो भी चीज किया वो किया, और ये जो स्टूडेंट्स हैं ये ज्यादा जानते हैं इसलिए ये इस चीज को कर पा रहे हैं, और आप कम जानते हो इसलिए आप किनारे हो, तो इसमें प्रॉब्लम क्या है? अगर आप इंटरव्यू में अच्छा परफॉर्म नहीं करोगे तो ऑब्वियसली हम आपको कम नंबर दे रहे हैं, प्रॉब्लम। बट थिंग्स चेंज्ड आफ्टर 1950, and then again some paradigm shift happened in 1990 and 2006, and after that you will see that especially the government institutions, you will find a diversified classroom. In many of the institutions, you will find more than 50% students are from SC/ST and OBCs communities, and if you add the number of minorities in many of the institutions, the number will become 60% or so. But teachers' staff rooms, they remained as if time stopped for them. They were not changing the structure of the staff room. So that is the primary contradiction of Indian academia, upper caste dominated teacher staff room and SC/ST OBC dominated classroom, and that is actually leading to some sort of I don't know whether I should use the word bloodbath or not, but actually it's a bloodbath if you take everything. Suicide might be some extreme high intensity event, but discrimination and the things happen on some many subtle ways. So this is the I think this is the problem, and how to navigate this space, how to go about it, what is the solution, what we can do is the I think we have to ponder on that. And my prescription is we have to demand, we have to ask, and we have to intensify our demand for diversified faculty. That is very important, because without that, I think things will not change unless we have diversified faculty. But that is not happening despite so many petitions and all that. Many questions were raised in the parliament, but that hasn't changed the landscape as far as faculty rooms are concerned. But still, we have to raise this issue, with whatever might we have, with whatever resources we have. Other thing I think is to have solidarities amongst us. We have to align with all the persecuted communities. There should be a sort of larger solidarity between SC/STs, OBCs, even minorities, and small section maybe of upper caste progressive, whatever you say. And third solidarity, I think, is more important, to have some sort of global solidarity. We need to align with Blacks, Jews, Romas, and all other communities. I think there is a huge possibility now because of social media and all other things. We have to actually, without internationalizing this issue, we will not be able to counter the strategies and tactics of upper caste. So yeah, these are the three strategies should be for us. I will look forward because I haven't heard many of the presentations. So let's see what we can do, but we have to do something because we are not here to die. I agree with Shalini. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Mondal, for again. I mean, if I can just speak for 30 seconds on that last point where Professor Mondal has left, that we need to sort of make it a global. And it's not that there was not an attempt that is being made. Professor Mondal himself has been very instrumental in social media to make it a global kind of case, and some of us would be remembering that. I mean, would of course remember that there was a time when in Durban summit there was an attempt which was made by Dalit professors, Dalit Bahujan intellectuals to sort of make caste at par with race, but then you would know that who were the sociologists, those who were basically quote unquote hired from India and sort of chartered over there to sort of halt that process. And that's where that actually put the nail in the coffin. And that is why it has not become. And that is why in the case of Cisco, very thankfully that this equal opportunity, what is that? The California, probably, I forgot their specific name. So they have come up with this case. They actually took the case up and they actually in a way recognized the caste discrimination in the system.
One minute, Subhajit. Actually, I think this time is actually the right time to do such thing because of the caste is now discussed in the Western academia after this book of Isabel Wilkerson, and it's there on the table. And even Brandeis University, the Jewish university there in the Boston, they have included caste in the protected category. So I think this is the time we are at the right juncture of the history where we can intervene. So we have to write in international journals and we have to internationalize the issue. That should be one of the agenda. Yeah. Sorry for interrupting.
Thank you so much, Dilip. And let me now invite Russell. Of course, Russell is an independent researcher and works basically at the intersection of intergenerational trauma, aesthetics, gender. Again, a very, very important domain. I remember I read a very recent piece of Russell on Arivu's Enjoy Enjami in the Indian Express, a great piece. So without further ado, I invite Russell with her presentation. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hi everyone, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Hi, Jai Bhim. Thank you, Subhajit, for moderating this panel. And I'd like to thank Sayantan and Life of Science project for putting this together. I want to, I mean, of course, we've heard from such various perspectives what happens in higher educational institutions, and just at the aftermath of Seema Singh's video, there was a lot of Twitter spaces that hosted discussions around casteism. And this is, in many ways, this is not new, as many people have told. This has constantly happened in IITs. It's just because of pandemic has enabled this virtual video conferencing thing, and we have been able to record and we have the proof that this has come to light. I am from an IIT, and I don't know how many people are aware, but IITs have a very, very specific way of handling not just casteist or any other grievances that come to them, but the one of the things that Seema Singh said in the video was that you can go to any, you can go to the SCSC cell, you can go to the women's cell, but nothing can be done. She's saying that so brazenly because that is the kind of shield that many IIT, in fact, all IIT professors have. And this goes back to the history of why IITs were established. It dates back to, in fact, IIT Kharagpur being the first IIT and inaugurated by Nehru. And if people have read Nehru's inaugural address, there's a very, of course, there's this very liberal, light, left-leaning idea of what these institutions are supposed to be. They're supposed to be institutions which where you can learn, you can have like excellence, which is what all IITs, they strive for. But also this thread of that we will go beyond caste or religion or any of these things, and have this idea of like Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam sort of a thread that goes in his speech. And in fact, IIT Kharagpur is established, the ground is established in the detention camp. It's called the HD detention camp, and it was historical because it was the camp that was set up during pre-independence era as a detention camp for Indians. And it's quite ironic that now the same place is, the same institute is acting, which many IITs do, in that sort of like a prison where we go for like safe space. And as many of us know, higher education spaces are safe spaces, are spaces that are supposed to nurture you. And because we come from, and many of our students come from difficult backgrounds, we look to educational institutions to give us that sort of a space, whether that's mental space, whether that's space that you have a room to study for yourself, whether that's a space where you're able to interact with a lot of people and you expect all of this, but it ends up being like a detention camp and you really can't do much. And IITs have, the Senate really holds a lot of power. In other central institutions, there are students who've constantly fought for the visibility of discrimination on campuses, and they can name the VCs and they can even go to court. But IITs are not set up that way, and they're purposefully set up that way to depoliticize campus. And this is something that happened in my IIT as well, where when you enter the IIT, you will have a form which says that you cannot take part in any student political groups, or you cannot start any of it. And you have to sign those forms to even get in, and which is why you don't have the visibility of any of the other student political, like if you have it in JNU or TIS or University of Hyderabad, we don't have that in IITs. And any issue that you have has to be taken to the Senate, and Senates in IITs have always been historically predominated by BTech students and of course cis men, and they don't have enough representation within the Senate itself. And any sort of grievance, even if it is a sexual harassment grievance, even if it is something to do with some professors like wrongfully marking you, you have to go to the Senate. And if a professor is treating you, it's like casteist towards you, you really cannot appeal to a higher court, because the IIT, the director of the IIT has in fact an inordinate amount of power, and the only person who can sort of supersede that is the President of India. And there have been cases where it's mostly where employees or professors of IITs have contested this and they've gone for either a promotion or a payment or something like that. But there are really, really very few cases where students themselves have gone ahead and filed a case. There's one case of IIT Kharagpur, a student um, who went to court, went to smaller court, and then was referred back to the IIT for whatever action that needs to be taken, and the institute decided to rusticate him. And I think the judgment says that it is the court, it's a small court, this court that exceeded its power. And this is a level of power that an IIT holds, that the director of an institution holds. So it's not simply enough for us to say that of course, end casteism in IIT, end casteism in all higher education institutions, but this is really a problem of the legal framework of how IITs have been set up, and that needs to be changed. And there's very, very little work that is being done because some of the, which is said as the pros of the IIT system is that the professors enjoy complete freedom in how the courses are done. And if you have, like in my own experience, the very first semester I went to IIT, I had experiences where my professor was grading me less. And I spoke to some of the other students, and as many people have said that these are professors who are part of like left parties. They are very like at the face level, they're very, very progressive, but they have a history of doing this, and I know that they've done this to other marginalized community students in all of the previous years. But there's really no action that I could take, because the only appeal is the Senate, which is the student Senate. And I was doing my master's, so there's already that divide that happens. And if it goes beyond the Senate, it goes to the faculty Senate. And because there is very, very less representation. In my campus, IIT Gandhinagar, there was only one Dalit professor, and everybody else was Savarna. So there's not much support that you can expect from any place. And if I was in whatever capacity, if I was rusticated from the university, I wouldn't even be able to contest that in court. Even leaving aside how difficult legal access is, or forgetting that that aspect of having someone defend you, even to get to court is like a difficult process if you are an IIT student, which is why most IIT students don't really do much. In fact, the alumni statement that was put forward, you're able to do it in some capacity because you've passed out of an IIT and there's no fear. But when I was a student and the MTech fee hike happened, there were hardly, and most people disagreed with the fee hike. It was taken in the IIT Directors Council decision. Most students disagreed, and when you are from a science background, it's a little more difficult, which is how, and which is something that we can see from Ra's Losha list also. Most of the professors named were social sciences professors and humanities professors. There's hardly any professors from the science background that were named. And that's not because there aren't any of those cases. It's just because the science community is tied so closely that word gets spread so quickly around these labs or these professors. And if you take any sort of action, or even if you address it, you're looking essentially at the end of your research career. You're not going to get recommendations. You're not going to be able to go outside the country to pursue anything that you want to. So most students do keep quiet, and these sort of microaggressions keep building up. And it's true because we don't have a way to we don't have strong communities or strong student groups where we can go and address this. And there are only few IITs. Some of the older IITs have like Makepeace, study circle, or things like that. But some of the newer IITs, like my IIT, doesn't have one. It doesn't have an equal opportunity cell. It doesn't have, and in fact, I think IIT Kharagpur has an internal complaints ICC, which is one of the ways that they say that we don't really require an equal opportunity cell because you have this and you can address everything here. But it really doesn't take into account some of the other discriminations that students face in these institutions. And also, one of the other points that I wanted to make was when we talk about collectivizing and having a sort of cross solidarity, we must also acknowledge that when we say marginalized communities, who are we really like including in this space? Because we have as like a trans person or an NB person and queerness, and all of these are also marginalized identities. But then we are collectivizing around that. And my IIT had a queer club, but it didn't have an SEST thing. And when I started a study circle there, I was constantly asked, why are you naming it like Savitri Birsa, all of that sort of a thing. And the discrimination that happens is often very, it is subtle, but it's also overt. Like I've had emails that have come to me saying that the same old arguments about reservations. And these are, I think, just like Seema Singh, these are students who have written papers on reservation, which are published in very well-known journals. There's only one ST student in my batch, but there are at least 4 professors who are working on Adivasi communities. And often these professors get invited to events where whether there is like an Ambedkar Jayanti event or anything like that. So when we look at allyship, because we don't have communities to go towards, we look at the professors who we think might be allies to us, or we go towards students who are closest to us, but those don't serve, and they mostly are like self-serving things that happen. So which is why there is a need to define what, or even like how we collectivize. And the idea of appropriation is not being given due importance, which is why we still have Brahmin scholars being cited for Dalit feminist work, even though there's a huge and long history of Dalit feminism, or even within, and I think that there are like other people on the panel who can speak to this when we have the question of gender neutrality or gender neutral hostels and campuses, which is something that's happening. So who gets to be in these gender neutral hostels when the institution has not even established an equal opportunity cell? And if I, as a trans NB person, is in this gender neutral hostel, who am I sharing space with? Am I going to share it with Brahmin students? Am I going to share it with other Savarna students? And the discrimination just disappear because we share a particular gender identity or a particular, there's a queerness that comes there. And I think another important thing I think is to address is how do we come together, not just by sort of equating all identities together, because we cannot talk to an Adivasi identity or an OBC identity, and the same cannot be vice versa, which is what I see happening a lot. And that sort of discrimination within that, the inter-community discriminations also don't get acknowledged within university spaces or campus spaces. Because yes, there is no SEST cell, but also because there's hardly any faculty or anything within these campuses that make life easier for you or for you to go, and it becomes an individual thing. It becomes something that you have to talk and like move towards a certain space. And I think that's where I'll end it, that we have to be able to talk to each other and understand each other, even within marginalized communities, and move to a better place instead of having the umbrella of collectivization, which doesn't serve anybody. Jerry, thank you.
Thank you so much, Russell, for coming up with those nuances and insights. Again, and thanks for talking a bit about the science communities. That's again something which is rarely being talked about. Even the life of science organizers are doing it for some time, that I have got to know. But these are very, very new nuances, and of course and the science communities and the gatekeeping, it of course has created some kind of caste habitus over there. And you do not have a Dalit Adivasi student in the class, but then you have all the Savarna professors, their main expertise is on Dalit Adivasi subaltern studies. So which is what, I mean, that's the irony of in fact, this casteist Professor Seema Singh, she has written a paper on subaltern studies, which is what the irony is, that, and here is this professor who also is calling the marginalized caste students as so this is, again, probably this is the reason where there is no critical scholarship has not come up the way it has come up in the West, probably in the United States, where there is a lot of research done on white privilege and whiteness, but that's not the case with the Savarna academicians in India. They are still engaged to keep, in fact, the Dalit Adivasi lives, Dalit Adivasi Bahujan lives, the marginalized communities' lives, and they are sort of making careers over it, rather than sort of looking within or interrogating their own privilege. So there's probably no work. There's a big no in their work to interrogate their own privilege. So there is no critical scholarship on that. I once again thank Rachelle for that wonderful presentation, and let me now so go to Vaishali. Vaishali is of course a PhD scholar in anthropology at IIT Hyderabad. Again, a very interesting IIT. So we are really looking forward to the presentation of Vaishali. Vaishali.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for inviting me to this webinar. And given the time, I would quickly like to go to the points and allude some points that we are discussing today about higher education in India and caste in general. And to talk about caste in higher education, I have been studying in fairly public universities which are also considered to be fairly progressive, like Delhi University, Hyderabad Central University, and now recently I have been admitted to IIT Hyderabad. And from here, I am trying. What I'm talking about is a lot of my fellow panelists have also talked about this at great length. But I'm coming back to the nature of violence, which was kind of as we saw in Seema Singh's casteist episode, much casteist episode, and how we see that the kind of violence that is kind of prevailing in these universities at great length. And so apart from that, firstly I will say in these difficult times like the spread of COVID pandemic, education has taken, and the distribution of knowledge itself, the channel of the distribution of knowledge has drastically shifted to the online mode, which has its own sets of difficulties. And apart from that, and these kinds of difficulties lead to various problems as we have seen since the lockdown, like access to education portals and kind of alienation and isolation which is felt. And all of these problems are kind of deepened when we are talking about students from marginalized backgrounds like Dalit students as myself. And what has changed, though these kind of modes of exclusions were ever present in these universities, and it is not a very the novel part in Seema Singh's episode is the fact that it happened online. The words that she said or the sentiments with which she has kind of presented her views, it is that has are less new elements than the fact that it was an online class, and hence we could see it recorded in a video. And so I want to just online that I just want to like underline that this kind of online distribution of knowledge that has only exaggerated some forms of exclusion which were always present in universities. So the kind of problems like access, isolation, alienation, kind of most often inferiority complex and fear that has been instilled in students from marginalized communities and from marginalized communities such as Dalit caste is um, like has been historically evolutionized, and the kind of ways in which casteism is kind of communicated is it is a very advanced, like it has been evolutionized, developed. That method of casteism has developed. Like I think somebody is talking about how these spaces are sought to be casteless because they have been in touch with modernity, and then how these modes of casteism is in touch with modernity. And when in the most modes of casteism come in touch with modernity, how these kinds of they change, like they change in a way that is convenient to them, and it is not that um, um, it is not that overt and covert. These the forms of violence that really I kind of see, especially in white collar spaces like universities, a lot is kind of covert. I think somebody else was also talking about the everydayness of these covert violence that a student has to inevitably go through in order to gain knowledge. And why I want to say that why I want to say that these forms of violence were ever present, and the COVID pandemic has only changed because when we because why I say this is also because the owners of these forms of violence must fall on the universities, on the officials in these universities, and not on the COVID pandemic, because that is not really novel as the COVID pandemic. It is that is the only the presentation of the casteism here we see is kind of new, but it has been always there, and the kind of sentiments it produces amongst the audience as us and as the students who go through it very actively has been kind of the same. Okay, so now if we come back to the incident that took place in a preparatory class for which is, as we have already kind of gone through, which is predominantly meant for students who hail from marginalized backgrounds, and the kind of when Seema Singh like kind of hurled abuses at students from marginalized Dalit and backward castes. Many people have already talked about it, and what conclusion, not conclusion, but what I really think that if we are to categorize this uh, this specific event of violence, it would be kind of an overt form of violence, meaning where a person's caste and their identity is like kind of actively being talked about, hailed, and when it is a very explicit mention of abuse, and it is so we can kind of say that it is an overt form of violence. But however, on my experience from fairly progressive universities like Delhi University and Hyderabad Central University, and one can see that in spaces like social sciences, where I do also come from, we see that these so-called liberal spaces, students encounter kind of covert forms of violence, where these everyday forms of violence also lead to the same conclusion. Now, both of these forms of violence, overt and covert, have the same ingredient of casteism, which stems from kind of the same question of a questionable merit of a Dalit scholar. So, this questionable merit of a Dalit scholar seems to be like at the central or a focal point from which these kinds of violence, both overt and covert, are stemming from. And other kind of covert forms of violence, which kind of are ever present in universities, like a total unacknowledgement of any caste discourse at all by upper caste Savarna professors and also peers, kind of propagates this same caste ideology, and the constant there is a difference which I really found intriguing between IITs and spaces like Delhi University. Though casteism is present in both spaces, and where the social sciences, there is a constant, there is an insistence in IITs about constant depoliticization of campus. On the other hand, in very liberal departments of liberal colleges like in Delhi, it is there is a constant insistence on questioning, on politicization of everyday life in general. But the common denominator which kind of runs through both the institutions is of caste. That of caste and invisibilization of caste, in a sense that, and also professors who are kind of progressive left-leaning professors who would talk about the state, who would talk about several wrongdoings that are happening. But there is a complete blindness towards caste that I think is the common denominator between these universities. Another forms of covert violence is also constantly I have faced in class, in a space that such as classrooms, is a constant mocking of Baba Sahib Ambedkar and any contribution of any scholarly contribution that has been made by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, in the sense that there is a I think in the starting somebody mentioned about this violence that spreads in the epistemological arena, and one can say that there is a systemic erasure, epistemic and systemic erasure of Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar from the syllabi that have been prescribed. For example, coming from courses like sociology and English literature, there has been a kind of um, lack of significant presence of Baba Sahib's ideology when in these departments, and they teach when they will want to intend to teach about sexism and feminism as well. And there is like a kind of how Baba Sahib is still absent from the university syllabi on Indian society, social stratification, feminism, Indian political thought, as well as, of course, caste. And how it is a systemic erasure of his ideas and thoughts, which uh, which might have helped, or which might have helped the students coming from SCST backgrounds. And these are just some examples of of the kind of violence which occur more so than ever today. And and now I would come back to Seema Singh's kinds of incident that has happened. And now, as we, as like an audience who is kind of receiving these forms of happenings, and these kinds of happenings, and now we can, as a critical audience, we tend to pay attention only to these kind of overt forms of violence, which also happened sort of in the Hathras case, where as an audience, but I think we need to think a little more as a critical audience, because these overt forms of violence also bring with them a kind of, they are embedded in some shocking element. They are embedded in they are embedded in shock. They are embedded in a kind of horrifying element which we feel as audience when we look at these things. However, when we look at other everyday forms of violence, mm, uh, uh, the shock does not really, like, we do not really feel shock. Apart from that, it feels so naturalized. So now I want to really kind of focus on this naturalized, deep-seated forms of violence, which is so instilled in kind of university culture. And how this covert forms of violence, which is deep-seated through the mechanisms of Brahminical ideology, which also kind of establishes the vice chancellor and the HODs and the professors who are predominantly coming from Savarna caste. And this also indicates that these kinds of sly comments, upper caste professors in university syllabus lacking in Ambedkarite views and general undermining of Dalits as scholars and academia, are also seen as no are also seen as kind of natural forms of ongoing, natural process of ongoing. And uh, um, so I will kind of wrap up soon with these coming back again to Seema Singh's kind of violence, which are, I think, also focusing on these violence is also important, apart from kind of understanding how covert and overt violence are kind of interdependent in with on each other, in the sense that one kind of feeds the other, because one kind of provides, one facilitates the other, in the sense that it kind of provides certain kind of a safe space for Savarnas to uh, a safe space for them to unabashedly talk about their feelings about Dalit students in a very apolitical language, or or to really freely talk about, freely express their casteist views. So these kinds of so one thing that I found really interesting in the Seema Singh's incident, which has already been talked about, that in the way, in the speech of her manner, the shows how there is like, there is the constant theme about flaunting their impunity, because there is flaunting their impunity constantly, because there is a certain kind of trust that has been established by this Brahminical administration of IITs, as well as this specific professor. And more often, most caste violence also have a kind of same emotional stemming, in the fact that they want to teach these people a lesson. So these through these performance of actor, hate speech, and casteist language, they want to set an example. I think for Dalit students to do not cross this line, to do not be this kind of assertive Dalits. Hence, these kind of examples are being set constantly by these professors to establish their status quo time and again. And like through these two things, we can also conclude that the confidence and unabashedness of her speech, or like of her hate speech, clearly informs us that she is being protected. She is being protected by the kind of similar ideology that instills that remains pervades these university kind of spaces. And I will just take one more minute, and I'll add with the kind of apology that has been come out, and kind of there is a running theme in these kinds of apologies when even in sexual harassment cases or cases like these, where the first kind of instinct of the perpetrator is to suddenly patronize the students, and how the act of patronizing is kind of coming through a very kind of false love that has been kind of put on in a very oppressive manner, as using the language as quote unquote, like the students are quote unquote as my own children. So this is like a common route that is taken by the Savarna perpetrators. And the second point is the kind of discourse on mental health, which is kind of been hijacked very vehemently by the Savarna, mm, like uh, because there is certain kind of woke language that has been instilled and that has been kind of introduced to this public very soon. And so how, if we are to really study the apology, we can really see that how this kind of extreme stress and the preposterousness of the kind of excuses that are being given, because it really seems like extreme stress uh, is the result of extreme stress leads to casteism somehow, instead of just like getting tired. So these are the kind of points that I really wanted to highlight. One being the interdependence of covert and overt violence, and how looking at them both, how one like kind of facilitates the other, as that was one, and the kind of forms of covert violence and everydayness. Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you, Vaishali. I will just, since we are running a bit sort of time, I'll quickly go to Prajwal, and I sincerely apologize to Prajwal for for making you wait for quite some time. And Prajwal again is is doing masters in history from HCU, and he is very importantly holding a very important post. He is the in charge general secretary of Ambedkar Student Association. He also, in fact, was the founder member of Ambedkar Students Association in Ferguson College at Pune. So anyways, so I go straight to Prajwal and invite Prajwal to start his presentation.
Thank you,
Jai Bhim.
My revolutionary Jai Bhim to everyone. I am very glad and thankful for the organizers to make me the part of the panel. So I would like to I am doing my master's in University of Hyderabad, and before that I was placed in a prominent institute of Maharashtra, Ferguson College, and however, coming to University of Hyderabad was my first ever experience to leave my state and have an opportunity to engage with Dalit students across the country, and understand caste more critically, and every day realize and every day see how with what inhuman impunity caste works in the university spaces. Like every year, Ambedkar Student Association has been keeping a check on the implementation of reservation policy. And every year university violates the implementation of reservation policy every time PhD seats have been remained vacant. when I entered the university, one such protest was the ongoing protest that was like immediately when I joined an Ambedkar Student Association was raising it, and I happened to be in that protest. The first, in the confrontation with the departments, with the HODs and with the faculties, the first ever thing what was coming up was, no, we couldn't find a potential candidate for the seat. That is why we have to leave the seat vacant. Those students couldn't qualify the merit. This idea of merit immediately took me to a flashback. I am a second generation Dalit. My mother and my father, both of them are having a secured government job and financially doing quite well. They couldn't seek education, the way I can seek, because there were so many insecurities and instabilities. They had to look for a job and stop their education, and that is how they can provide a dignified life to me and an aspiration to me. And I went to English schools, I went to coaching classes, and they could they tried their best to whatever minimal resources we had to pull, and take me to as better institutions as I can go, and the better quality of education they felt I should have. And a kind of training was being undergoing, through which I could speak good English, I could write English, I could read English. So when I realized and when I experienced my journey in University of Hyderabad, qualifying the merit of University of Hyderabad, have my experiences of caste really changed? So, the conclusion is none. My identity as a second generation learner with a stable economic background has been a more provocative identity to them, because I don't qualify their norms of being a Dalit, how they understand a Dalit. So whenever I ask a question in a classroom, it comes in a direct, confront, it comes as a direct question to the power dynamics of the class, which eventually led for me to turn into a very submissive receptors of the classrooms, where, questioning, was something that was, always came up with a humiliation. Whenever I wanted to choose, like the first ever experience, that was the most disappointing experience, was me writing an assignment for which I, was trying to seek help from one of the faculty, and I proposed a subject and I was quite confident over it. But supposedly the subject did not have caste in it. I, as a person coming from this social background, was thought to write something on caste, but never something on like gender or sexuality. And that is why, when I was saying that I will write over this, I was said that, can you really do it? I am not sure. So what I was proposed to was to take down the assignment and not to work on that proposed topic. Whenever I question myself that, this was something that was kind of really very demotivating to me, but still, why did I not question the faculty? That came as a, it comes as a vulnerable position point of view, where I was there, where I couldn't, first give it a language of casteism and say that, this professor, the way the professor has demotivated me is a caste, is coming from her social location and my social location, and this is something that she shouldn't do. Over the entire experience of being in University of Hyderabad, slowly I realized, this came as a constant isolation. The way, friends are approachable to you, your seniors are approachable to you. They work in a very casteist network. Their networks are already solidified with their caste locations. In such a case, I had never had an access to faculties the way, my other classmates, upper caste classmates have. I never had an access to my seniors, my PhD scholars, who can guide me through the process and help me, ask me to what to read, how to go forward with my research. This way the aspirations and the ambitions through which I can come, and can secure through the kind of mobilization my family has achieved, is kind of kept at the bay and watched very critically and not allowed to take forward. And this entire process led me into a phase of isolation, and I couldn't it was a depressing phase, and I couldn't really knew how to go ahead with it. And that was the time when my engagement with Ambedkar Student Association started more and more, and through which I could form I could meet people with my similar experiences of casteism, of dealing with faculties, dealing with this campus. Casteism, we generally associate with a classroom, but when you are living in a university, it is everywhere, in the public spaces, in your hostel rooms, and like organizations like ASA gave me an organic community which was there, and because of that, all these experiences of humiliation, discrimination, of loneliness were kind of were heard, and a sense of assertion came through this kind of organization. The way people in this function, the brotherhood, the natural feeling of common sufferings were persistent. And when I talk about this, it is really necessary to check and evaluate the history of organizations who have flourished across the campus. ASA itself is an organization who has a deep history of Karam Chedu and Tunduru massacres, through which organizations have developed. Organization like ASA TIS, which comes as an impact of Rohit movement, BAPSA. It is very necessary to revive the histories of these organizations, the need of these organizations, and again, not limit them into the political orientation of these organizations, and should be understood as a social movement, as a movement that is guaranteeing a kind of collective security, assertion, a network, a scholastic network, to the students of Dalit and Bahujan communities. With this, I will conclude my this. Thank you, Jai Bhim.
Thank you, Prajwal, for sharing your experiences with ASA. Of course, I was back in 2012, 2010 to 12. I was associated with the ASA. Brother Dontha and others were there. So he was then the president of the Students' Union. So we were having, we were probably living a great Ambedkarite, Periyarite, Fuleite moment in the campus. Well, that said, and then probably as there was the Rohit Bhemula happened, institutional murder, Podile came, and things like that. So anyways, but let me sort of conclude, and before I do that, let me very profusely thank each of the panelists for such a wonderful presentation and with new insights. It's been a great learning experience for me personally, and I'm sure for all of you. Those are attending the I can see some of the professors are attending this webinar, and I thank Dr. Rehnamol Raveendran, Prajwal, Vaishali, Rachelle, Shalini, Riya, Tejendra, and of course Professor Dilip Mandal, and of course the team that actually put together this whole webinar. It was basically a great work by the Life of Science team. Of course, Sayantan. I can't imagine this webinar without Sayantan, and of course Asima and Nandita, the Life of Science team. So I thank all of you on behalf of what should I say? I mean, as moderator, let's say. I mean, there are many takeaways from this whole webinar, and few of the things that I thought that I should share very, very quickly, maybe 1 minute or not more than that. One is that there has been a talk that's going on immediately after probably the Hathras. The pass the mic, episode, or let's say pass the mic syndrome, which again, these are the every time a Dalit Bahujan person will have to die, out of caste atrocities or rape or humiliation or things like that, and then you remember something like pass the mic. But again, I feel pass the mic might be a good thing, but I feel this is again a kind of stereotypical process, because you never share the mic on other issues, but when something like caste atrocities happen, when Hathras happens, you remember to pass the mic, even though that there has been a lot of knocking on the doors, and then you pass the mic. But then this is again a very, very stereotyped way of passing the mic, because on other issues, as someone on the panel was mentioning, that you never invite us to share the mic, so none of the Dalit Bahujan women or Dalit feminists or intersectional feminists or nothing of that sort happens. So this is broadly speaks that how there is at the back of mind, there might be some kind of oak Dalit Lives Matter hashtag in the bio or in the name, but with the Savarna title. But then deep down there is this, there's no desire to really interrogate the caste privilege, which is again a very, very problematic thing. And as far as the academia, Indian academia goes, of course, it's a very, very Savarna get-kept academia, and there are rarest of the rare cases where the Savarna professors are coming up to interrogate their own privilege, doing academic works, producing scholarship. So there's no critical scholarship on them. They are not really interested. So they want to build careers on subaltern. People like Seema Singh, they want to build careers on subaltern studies, on the Dalit, Adivasi, marginalized Bahujan lives, even on Muslim lives. So that hypocrisy needs to be basically, one needs to get rid of that hypocrisy, and then there can be a good beginning, and then only probably democratization of this, agraharas will happen, because there is an illusion largely that university spaces are very, very democratic spaces, but it is a Dalit, Adivasi, marginalized Muslim Bahujan students. They know that how they are being traumatized through subtle and radical forms of humiliations in the campus. So this is, and this goes on, and it has to happen in so much that only the Dalit, Adivasi, Ambedkarite students, Dalit Bahujan Ambedkarite groups are coming up, and they have to sort of tell, the left liberals, those are otherwise Savarna liberals, and centrist liberals, and the liberals in general, that here is an issue, you need to sort of talk about it. Here is the discrimination at the interview boards that needs to be talked about. So every time, in fact, in the case of Seema Singh, what is very interesting, that none of the Savarnas or Savarna influencers, Savarna academics, they really came up. They haven't come up to with this demand to end casteism in IITs or to suspend a casteist abuser like Seema Singh, but it has to be again a collective effort of the Dalit, Adivasi, Bahujan activists, scholars, academics to sort of make it, to create the noise or much needed noise, and this is again and there is this confrontation that is going on when in the West there is a lot of critical interrogation happening on white privilege, white supremacy, whiteness. But that's not the case in India with the Indian Savarnas, let's say. Savarnas have been gatekeeping. Savarnas even do not think that the Periyarite, Ambedkarite, Savitribai Phuleite tradition is radical. They think that these are very off the mark. These are very, these are not really fascinating much to talk about, in the campus. And this is a kind of aberrance. This is coming from an aberrance that needs to be basically altered, and the change has to happen from change has to come from that side. I mean, as probably one of our panelists was saying, that we can't really take the responsibility to educate you, so you need to interrogate yourself. So that's the kind of that is what Savarnas have to take from the discussions, from this discussion at least. With these words, I once again thank each of the panelists, the attendees, and the overwhelming responses that we have got for this webinar. And now I invite Asima to sort of conclude the session.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Subhajit. Thank you so much for carrying the conversation. We've been listening and we have so much more to listen. Thanks for also your insights. And I've learned a lot. And we're really sorry that there was no time left. We've gone over 3 hours now. And thanks to the 36 attendees who are still here. And what we're going to do is try to answer all the questions. We will invite the panelists to answer whatever they want to, each of them, and we'll prepare a report and keep a follow-up going. Yes, thanks a lot, and really sorry for taking long. I'm sure people are hungry now, but maybe there's some nourishment that we received from this. And yeah, I want to thank again STEM Peers community for supporting this. We're using their Zoom Pro account. Yeah, please keep following the work that Life of Science does on our social media channels. And yes, there is a lot to do, a lot to learn to globalize the issue, to end the impunity, to keep the Savarna overrepresentation in check finally, and align more and revive the histories. And there's so much on my mind right now. And thank you so much to all the panelists. And we will try to diligently answer all your 23 questions that we've received. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Goodbye.